Alright guys, this next set of video notes is going to cover multicellular organisms. So we're basically going to be talking about plant cells and animal cells and how they compare to one another. So what exactly are multicellular organisms? Well, if you remember protists, we talked about some were single cellular organisms, which means they were only made up of one cell. Well, these organisms we're going to talk about are multicellular, meaning many, so it's an organism that consists of more than one cell. Each multicellular organism is going to have things inside of it that have a specific function, and these things are called organelles. These organelles that I'm referring to, I told you, have a specific job or a specific function within the cell. Just like in the human body, our heart has the job of pumping out blood to all parts of the body and carrying oxygen inside of the blood. It has a role. It has something, a specific function that it's doing. These organelles are the same. They're just these little tiny structures inside of the cell that, perform these specific functions within the cell. And some of the examples I'm giving you are nucleus, cell membrane, and cell wall, which we were talking about in a little bit. So a big thing to know about the different types of animal and plant cells is that they are shaped completely differently because of one specific organelle. Plant cells, very important to know, have more of a square shape, okay? So instead of having a round shape, they are going to have a square shape. And this is because they have an organelle called a cell wall, okay? The cell wall's function is to keep structure and protect the stuff inside of the plant cell. So because it has this cell wall, this strong, rigid material, it's more of a square shape. Now, an animal cell does not have a cell wall, okay? And because it does not have the cell wall, it doesn't have those rigid edges, and instead it comes across as a circular shape. And it doesn't have the strength that the cell wall gives, so it is definitely more of a circle with rounded edges. So if you look at the picture here, the animal cell definitely looks more circular. And then your plant cell, you see these rigid edges to it. Okay, so it looks more like a square because it has the cell wall. The cell wall that we keep talking about in our plant cells is a rigid layer of non-living material that surrounds the cell. So it's only in plant cells, which is important to know, only in plant cells. And its job is to protect and support the cell. Just kind of like your parent's job is to protect and support you, right? So here's your little parent, yay, and here's you as a little kid, yay, he's protecting and supporting you. That's the same function as the cell wall. The next one is the cell membrane, which plant and animal cells have. The cell membrane's role is to control what enters and exits the cell. Alright, so whatever the cell needs, it lets in, and the stuff that it does not need, it does not let in. If something needs to be let out of the cell, like waste or something like that, it has to go through the cell membrane to get in or get out. So it pretty much lets the good things in and keeps the harmful things out. And the comparison I'm making for this one is this nice little bodyguard guy. So if you're having some great grand glorious party, and you only want people coming in who you invited, you hire a security guard to only let the people pass through that you want to come through and be at your party. Okay? Same comparison to a cell membrane. The next organelle is a nucleus. The nucleus controls the functions of the cell. Anything that the cell has to do, the nucleus is going to tell it what to do. So in this comparison, it's going to be like the brain of the cell. Our brain tells us what to do, and the nucleus tells the cell what to do. So the nucleus has a bunch of different parts to it. It has a nuclear membrane, kind of like the cell membrane, except for it's a membrane that just goes around the nucleus to control what enters and leaves the nucleus. And it also separates the actual nucleus from the cytoplasm and other parts of the cell. Also in the nucleus, you're going to find chromatin, which is thin floating strands of genetic material. So any DNA that's within the cell is going to be chromatin, and it's going to be in the nucleus. The next one is cytoplasm, and we talked about with our protists cytoplasmic streaming and how cytoplasm was that clear gel-like stuff within the protist. Well, cytoplasm is also in plant and animal cells, and it's defined as a gel-like region that is between the cell membrane, right there, and the nucleus, which is right here. Okay, so all this jelly stuff in here is cytoplasm. Cytoplasm contains water, it contains nutrients, things like that. The next organelle that's in plant and animal cells is a mitochondria. The way I always tell my kids to remember it is think of it as the mighty mitochondria. Something that you think is big and mighty is going to be powerful. So the mitochondria are these little rod-shaped organelles that look like that. And they are considered the powerhouse of the cell because this is where energy is produced. Okay? So energy is produced inside these organelles. It's converted into power for the cell to use. So think of mighty mitochondria, something that's powerful because this is where our energy and our power is produced. The next organelle is the endoplasmic reticulum, which I frequently abbreviate as the ER. The endoplasmic reticulum is a maze of passageways, which you can see here. It looks like a big maze. And what these passageways do is they carry proteins throughout the cell, and they transport nutrients to the cell, okay? So the way I remember the endoplasmic reticulum's job is when I think of the ER, which I wrote right here, when I think of the ER, I think of the emergency room, because ER is an abbreviation for emergency room as well. And if you get hurt and you have to go to the emergency room, you have to travel on a road or a passageway to get there, right? So the endoplasmic reticulum, ER, is a passageway that carries things like proteins and nutrients. Ribosomes are small grain-like bodies that are going to be found floating around in the cytoplasm. Like you can see that little guy right there. There's another one. There's another one. Those are ribosomes. They float in the cytoplasm, and then they also, when they get there, attach to other organelles like the endoplasmic reticulum. The job of the ribosomes is to make proteins. So they are factories that produce proteins. The way I remember it is the first part of this word is ribs. And when you eat ribs, like a meat, any type of meat is going to give you protein. So, since the first part of this word has rib in it, I think of rib meat, and I know that meat gives me protein. So, that automatically makes my mind know that ribosomes are the areas that produce protein for the cell. Golgi bodies are flattened sacs and tubes, which you can see right here. And they get that protein that we were just talking about with the ribosomes. They get the protein that's made there. And, the protein's floating in the cytoplasm. It attaches to the endoplasmic reticulum. Well, once it attaches to the endoplasmic reticulum, it gets transferred by these little sacs and tubes called Golgi bodies. And these Golgi bodies get the proteins, they package them up, and then they send it back out to the rest of the cell. So it's kind of like a packaging area. The way I remember it is I see in Golgi bodies a lot of G's. And I know that it's the mailroom of the cell. So I came up with the idea of Gmail. G for Golgi bodies, and mail because it's like a mailroom. So if you can remember that there is a bunch of G's in Golgi bodies and think of an email account like Gmail, you will know that the Golgi body's role is to get things, package it up, send it out, just like a mailroom does. The next organelle is a vacuole. When we talked about protists, we talked about contractile vacuoles, which were areas that held wastes and opened and closed to let waste out. We also talked about food vacuoles, which stored food. So the key word here is storing or storage, okay? So vacuoles are storage areas for food, for materials, for waste, anything like that is going to be considered a vacuole. They are large water-filled sacs in plant cells, but they're smaller in animal cells. So in the example down here, this is a plant cell because it has these very strong, rigid corners, right? So that's a plant cell, and it shows this huge vacuole right here. Now, in an animal cell, the vacuole would be more like that. Okay, so smaller in animal cells, but bigger in plant cells. The way I remember vacuoles is I think of like a vacuum cleaner, and how when you suck stuff up, it goes up into like the vacuum bag or compartment, and it just holds the dirt. So, the way I remember it is the vacuum cleaners hold things. The vacuum cleaner bags are storage compartments, and so do vacuoles. They store things for the cell. Lysosomes are small round objects that are going to break down things. They clean up the waste inside of the cell. And they're found in animal cells, not particularly plant cells, but animal cells. And the way I remember this is by the word Lysol. Because Lysol is something that breaks down germs and cleans things, and lysosomes do the same thing. Chloroplasts are only found in plant cells, not animal cells. They are the big green structures that float around in the cytoplasm. There's chlorophyll, which makes the cell green, and it captures energy from the sunlight and creates food for the cell. So the whole process of photosynthesis is happening with these chloroplasts. And like I said, they're only in plant cells. They are not in animal cells. Alright, so what exactly are specialized cells? Specialized cells are just that. They're cells that are special, so they have a specific function. So whether it's a skin cell or a brain cell, each different type of cell has a specific job to do. So whenever you have cells that are on the skin, like skin cells, they have the same function. They come together and they create something grander. So cells will end up making tissues, and tissues will make up organs, and organs will make up organ systems. But cells with the same function get together, they create a tissue, and those tissues work together to create organs into the big hierarchy that makes up the human body. So we just need to talk a little bit about bacteria cells. Bacteria cells are smaller than our plant and animal cells. They do not have a nucleus. So in this picture right here, there's not a single spot where we see a nucleus. Okay, because remember the nucleus is kind of a round structure. This bacteria cell does not have a nucleus. We talked about in the nucleus how it has that chromatin and the DNA and stuff. Well, since this bacteria cell does not have a nucleus to hold the DNA is actually just found in the cytoplasm floating around. Okay? This last slide is here to help you tell the differences between plant and animal cells. The main differences you need to know is that plant cells will have chloroplasts and cell walls. Animal cells will not. But animal cells have lysosomes, where plant cells don't. And you can see in this picture here that all of the different organelles within the cell match up, except for the cell wall. There's not one in the animal cell. There's chloroplasts. Not one in the animal cell. But then over here in my animal cell, we have lysosomes. And there's not any over here in our plant cell. Okay? So those are the key differences that you need to make sure you know. If you guys have any questions about this information, see me in class and we will go over it.